Before a product reaches a store shelf, it passes through an invisible architecture of safety standards. Historically, enforcing consumer safety required a massive regulatory apparatus. The United States commercial supply chain is highly decentralized. Millions of individual vendors, distributors, and shopkeepers source materials from thousands of different origin points, creating a web of commerce that federal regulators must monitor daily. Enforcing these public health standards relies entirely on hard scientific data. Without rigorous analytical chemistry and controlled laboratory testing to establish baseline metrics, regulatory enforcement would be guesswork. Today, that responsibility falls to the Food and Drug Administration's Office of Regulatory Affairs. The ORA is the agency's lead office for all field activities, processing thousands of inspections, compliance audits, and enforcement actions across the country every year.
This scale introduces a critical operational vulnerability. If individual investigators applied different standards during inspections, or if field offices interpreted compliance protocols differently, the resulting regulatory inconsistencies would compromise public health outcomes. To solve this problem, the agency utilizes the Regulatory Procedures Manual. This document functions as the central operating system for internal FDA procedures. Its intent is clear. Adherence to this manual is paramount to assure quality, consistency, and efficiency in FDA operations. By dictating the exact steps an officer must take, the manual translates abstract mandates for public safety into a perfectly standardized, executable set of strict rules for federal enforcement. Because the manual dictates how inspections and enforcement are handled, industry professionals often ask whether the text carries the legal weight of federal statutory law. The document defines its own legal boundaries in the second section, labeled 𝗬𝗏. The text establishes an internal hierarchy. Other FDA manuals and guidance can supplement the Regulatory Procedures Manual, but they cannot supersede it. However, the manual places a hard limitation on its external authority. The procedures outlined within do not create or confer any rights for or on any person. Furthermore, the text explicitly states it cannot be used to bind the FDA or the public statutorily. This illustrates a strict legal dichotomy. The manual is an instruction set for internal operational mechanics, separated entirely from the external regulations found in the federal code. The rules are so strictly internal that if a compliance officer encounters a scenario not explicitly covered by the manual, they cannot act independently. They must inform division management and receive explicit concurrence before making any departure from the documented procedures. Therefore, when navigating an FDA audit, regulated entities must treat the manual strictly as an internal instruction set for FDA employees, not as a legal shield or weapon. This workflow chart maps the primary end users who rely on this internal instruction set daily. Data flows from the investigation officers executing the fieldwork to the compliance officers reviewing it, and up to division management. And while it specifically targets the divisions within the Office of Regulatory Affairs, the procedural frameworks established here are utilized across the entirety of the FDA. A massive federal agency frequently undergoes structural changes to adapt to new technologies. This presents an administrative challenge, keeping a static procedural manual relevant during widespread bureaucratic reorganizations. The manual's ongoing structural evolution was heavily catalyzed by a specific event. On May 15, 2017, the FDA initiated a rollout of program alignment across the ORA. Program alignment was an operational shift. Instead of managing personnel strictly by geographic location, the agency restructured its regulatory divisions around specific commodities, like pharmaceuticals, medical devices, or food. Because the physical structure of the agency changed, the manual itself had to be actively fragmented and rebuilt. The agency continuously updates the text by incorporating new, program-specific sections that map directly to this modular alignment. To manage these rapid structural changes, the manual relies on a continuous feedback loop. Change requests and revisions are actively accepted from internal agencies, local partners, industry professionals, and consumers. The Regulatory Procedures Manual acts as a living architectural map, forced to continually adapt to the physical reorganization of the FDA. When a procedural manual undergoes constant revision and modular updates, it risks losing its coherence. There must be a mechanism to ensure every new directive aligns with the agency's primary goals. The manual anchors its operational directives to 5 core values, listed explicitly in Section 5 of the introduction. The first 2 establish internal constraints.
Accountability mandates personal responsibility for individual and team commitments. Commitment to public health requires every action taken to safeguard public well-being. The next two establish operational constraints. Communication demands accurate information and active listening to understand opposing viewpoints. Integrity and respect requires adherence to high ethical standards in the field. The final axiom dictates execution. Quality requires high standards of excellence and a mandate to continuously improve the agency's work. These 5 foundational pillars serve as the load-bearing support for the thousands of highly specific technical instructions contained in the chapters that follow. This structure supports the ultimate mission of the Office of Regulatory Affairs, protecting consumers by maximizing the compliance of regulated products while minimizing the risks associated with those products. Every complex directive detailing a seizure, an injunction, or a recall in the subsequent chapters is simply one of these 5 bedrock axioms, operationalized to handle a specific field scenario. Because the manual actively incorporates new program alignments and procedural patches throughout the year, printing the text introduces a severe risk of operational error. A physical copy is inherently obsolete the moment it leaves the printer. The introduction addresses this directly. It states that whether an officer or an industry professional is reviewing a printed copy or the digital version, the most recent version online is the definitive document of record. The agency manages this by pushing future updates periodically throughout the year directly to the online framework hosted on the ORA's website. Relying on outdated procedural instructions during a federal compliance action creates immense logistical risk. The manual's authority exists purely in its dynamic digital state. The Regulatory Procedures Manual operates as the FDA's engine of consistency, ensuring that thousands of officers across the country enforce the same standards in exactly the same way. Navigating federal compliance requires mastering this living blueprint, a framework driven by public health axioms, strictly limited to internal operations, and existing purely as a dynamic digital truth.